Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to my channel. My name is Janelle. If you are a returning subscriber, what's up? What's happening? How you doing? I'm so happy to have you here today with your girl. And if you are new here, welcome to my channel. So nice to see you here. Well, actually, I can't actually see you, but you know what I mean. Thanks for coming by. I hope you all are doing well out there in the world. So as you can tell by the title of this video, we're going to be going over some flight attendant jargon / lingo and just different terms that are commonly used throughout the airline industry if you are a flight attendant. Some of these terms I'm going to be going over are terms that are utilized specifically with the company I work for, but they may be synonymous or similar to other terms that you use in a different airline, or if you heard other terms used by a flight attendant that you may be watching on YouTube that works for an airline that's different than the one that I'm currently employed with. But nonetheless, these are terms that are utilized very commonly within the industry, as well as just terms that I feel like would be really good to know if you're interested in becoming a flight attendant. I'm really excited about this video today. I think it's going to be fun. Of course, also as a disclaimer, I'm not going to be going over every single piece of lingo or term that may be utilized in the industry, but these are just some that I've jotted down. Feel free to start conversations in the comments. Like if I miss something or I might be wrong about something, just leave your feedback in the comments section. That's definitely welcome. I'm not a hater. Do what you got to do in the comments. I may be periodically looking down at my phone because there's notes on here with descriptions and stuff, because I am not a walking dictionary and I do not have this stuff memorized, so I'm gonna need some assistance. Okay. Let's get into flight attendant positions. So with my company, they are listed as FMO1, I believe is like the code that they use for flight attendant 1, or with other airlines you might hear a flight attendant or purser. So that basically means that individual is the lead flight attendant for that flight that is going to be worked that day or on that pairing for that trip. And so that flight attendant usually works with the first class passengers. That's a flight attendant that's going to be making the onboard announcements over the interphone on the aircraft. They will be the main person that's going to be directly having communication with the flight deck and the captain, and they will be kind of coordinating different things that go on during the flights, and with the other flight attendants will be like the main point of contact between all parties involved. So that's flight attendant A, purser, or FMAO1 if you work with the company that I am employed with. The next position may be flight attendant number 2, and that's a flight attendant that's going to be working with the purser that's in the front of the aircraft. So they're going to assist with working first class. They're going to assist with taking meal orders, or however you may coordinate how to do service in front of the aircraft with the purser. That's that position. And then you may have FAO1. FAO1 is typically the flight attendant that's working in the aft area of the aircraft, so the back of the airplane. They're going to assist with doing service in the economy area of the aircraft, along with another flight attendant, sometimes in the back as well. This individual is referenced to as flight attendant 4, or the aisle flight attendant. So depending upon what aircraft you're working on and what the minimum crew is for that aircraft will determine how many flight attendant positions will be utilized on that specific type of aircraft. So sometimes you may have a aircraft, or you may have a flight where the minimum crew is 3 flight attendants. Minimum crew is basically by FAA regulations, which is Federal Aviation Association. This determines how many flight attendants must be working on that aircraft in order for that plane to take off and have customers on board and all that jazz. But sometimes you may have a trip where you have 4 flight attendants, and that's 1 above minimum crew. So sometimes that does happen where you'll have extra flight attendants, and basically that extra flight attendant will just assist as needed in other areas that may need help by the flight attendants that's already covering the bases, the duties for their specific position on the aircraft. So if you need any additional details on that, feel free to ask questions below. And honestly, on any of these things that I point out, if I didn't clarify something good enough for you, just let me know and I'll try to type it out, because sometimes when I write things out, it makes more sense than when I'm talking. So with that being said, the flight attendants that work in the back of the aircraft are going to be doing the beverage cart in the economy cabin, and depending on how many miles a flight is, especially with my airline that I'm working with, we also have a meal cart. And so those 2 flight attendants will work the service in the aft of the aircraft, while the purser and the flight attendant number 2, maybe front galley, sometimes it's referred to, will work service in the forward area of the aircraft. Honestly, like, even though there's specific positions that flight attendants work on the aircraft, we all work together as a team. So if someone gets done early, or we realize that things may be backed up in a certain area of the aircraft, other flight attendants normally will offer help or assist in any way that they can. So even though on paper you're assigned a certain area, you have to cover your duties clearly, but it's also highly encouraged that you assist in other areas of the aircraft if you notice that your assistance would be appreciated. Since we're talking about flight attendant positions, I have to tell you guys my most favorite position to work. Can you guess? What do you guys think it is? All right, let's see if you guessed correctly. My favorite position is purser. I love being the purser because I love greeting people as they come on the aircraft. I love telling people to have a good day once they get off the aircraft. I love talking, so having the ability to facilitate all the announcements on the aircraft and just interacting with the individuals on a more personal level that are sitting in first class, kind of being like an advocate and a spokesperson basically for the company to get people to continuously either want to sit in first class or just continuously wanting to be a part of traveling. So I think pursers definitely have a huge hand in getting people to be return customer. Sometimes it can be a lot because a lot of times when you're done working in first class, you will typically go to the economy area of the aircraft and help with service in the back, or just sometimes when things kind of get busy on the aircraft, or if there's a medical emergency or there's communication that needs to be done with the flight deck, the purser is the one to do it. So sometimes it can be a lot, but I like a challenge. I like just interacting with multiple people, and I feel like being the purser definitely facilitates the opportunity to do that. So I love that position on the aircraft. If I'm not the purser, I would say my second favorite is probably being flight attendant number 2, the flight attendant that works in the front galley. Yeah, I like being in the front of the aircraft. My least favorite is probably going to be the floater, which is basically the flight attendant that will sometimes just be working in the back of the aircraft. It's also referenced sometimes as, like, I think D flight attendant, which is the one who works in the back galley. But like, say I get a trip and I'm the floater, I will work one flight and then I'll get on another flight with a completely different crew, and I'll work in the back of the aircraft again. And say this is a trip with 3 legs, and I get on the 3rd leg and I'm in the back of the aircraft again with a totally different crew again. And then there's even some times where you will fly with multiple crews that day and have a trip where you have a layover and you're the only one staying at that hotel by yourself because you are the floater that just gets bounced around from different like pairings, and you'll have different interactions with different crews literally every flight. Like, I kind of don't really like that, but there's some flight attendants that love that because they have the opportunity to meet flight attendants from various bases. They don't mind just being like kind of in a way by themselves, because sometimes you may stay at a hotel where you won't be with any flight attendants that you work with that day. So people don't feel bothered by that or don't really care, but for me, I don't really like that. You may hear the term crew. That basically just refers to the team that's working that flight for the day. So the crew would most of the time encompass flight attendants and the flight deck. So that would be the captain and the first officer as well. So that's the crew. Crew scheduling, which is basically a area of the company that handles our schedules. They assign your flights, your days off that you're working, or your reserve days that you are going to be scheduled to be on reserve. So they take care of that. If you have any questions about your schedule or if something's wrong about your schedule, those are the people that you would call or who would handle those issues. So they're called crew scheduling, and they're the people that's going to call you at 3 a.m. saying, hey, we have a check-in for you at 6 a.m. today. Have a great day. Another term that I kind of already touched on earlier in this video is aft area of the aircraft, which basically means the back of the aircraft where economy is located, and then the forward area of the aircraft is going to be where first class is, and then typically the area that you're going to be boarding onto the plane is kind of the front of the aircraft, depending on the aircraft, because sometimes if it's a really big plane, you'll board the aircraft on door 2, which is like technically the middle of the aircraft. So it all just depends. So keep in mind that sometimes the things that I'm saying may not specifically apply depending on what aircraft you may be having in your mind. The next term I want to go over is galley. That's basically the area where the kitchen is stowed on the aircraft, and it's also kind of like the flight attendant office. That's where the jump seats are located. Jump seat is pretty much the seats that the flight attendants sit in when we're on the plane, where we sit for takeoff, taxi, and landing. Sometimes if you're non-revving, which is basically, here's another term, you are using your flight benefits to travel to another destination, and say for example all the seats are full but you really need to get to where you're going, you can jump seat and sit in the flight attendant jump seat in your regular clothes or whatever, and you can sit there as well. So what's a food cart? A food cart is basically the carts that you guys see flight attendants push out during the service portion of a flight, where they are either giving you complimentary snacks or snacks available for purchase. The cart is basically the storage area for the meals or the snacks that are on there. A beverage cart is exactly probably what you're thinking. It's a cart that you see flight attendants push down the aisle that houses the beverages that are either being sold or given out complimentary on the aircraft. It keeps everything organized and separated in that cart, and they are stowed in the galley area, which is what? The kitchen part of the aircraft, or our office, or where we gossip. No, I'm just kidding. We don't do that as flight attendants. We don't gossip. At least I don't. Pairing is basically a term that's utilized when you go onto your schedule and you see that you've been assigned a trip, and your pairing is going to just have the details of the trip that you were assigned. A trip is basically where you're going to be going. So say for example, I'm flying from Cleveland to New York. That's my trip. The trip that you're working, basically the destinations that you will be flying to during that day or the days that you will be working that pairing. Another term is leg, which basically means it's one flight. So if I say, yeah, I only have one leg for today, it basically means from Cleveland to New York. And then I may have two legs where I go from Cleveland to New York to Cleveland. That's two legs. So that's basically what a leg means. A layover is basically when you get to a destination that's not where you're based at and you're going to be spending the night there. So say for example, I'm going from Cleveland to New York and I'm not going to be leaving until the following day, and I have a rest period in between. The company will house you in a hotel and you will spend the night there until it's time for you to check in and start your flight for the following day. That's a layover. Let's say reserve basically is where you are not assigned specific days to work and you don't really know where you're going, but you know probably what days you have off and you do not have a set schedule. That's being on reserve, and everyone starts out on reserve no matter what company you work for. So that's reserve. Line holder is basically someone who knows their schedule every week. They know what trips they're going, they know what days they have off, and they know that they won't be called in the middle of the night to work a trip the following day. So a lot of people love having a line because it makes being a flight attendant a lot easier in a lot of aspects. Also, like with being on reserve, you don't know where you're going, you don't know when or if you will be going anywhere. You're just pretty much on standby. So that's why a lot of people don't really like it, because it's kind of hard to plan things, or like you may be just sitting at home hoping to get a call to get a trip and you don't get EVUs and you're like wah 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 wah. But honestly, like now that I've been with the company for like 6 months, it's just kind of, I don't know, you get used to it. Hopefully I'll be a line holder one day so I can enjoy the greatness of not being on reserve. But it's not that bad, y'all. Like some people really dislike it, but for me, like I don't know, it's kind of just a normal thing for me now. I don't really trip too much about it. So don't let people scare you about starting this career, because I know a lot of people present being on reserve as like the worst thing ever, but don't let that deter you from getting into this career, because everyone starts off on reserve and a lot of people make it work. And depending on where you're based at, being on reserve is not the worst thing ever. Like where I'm based at right now, reserve life is actually really good compared to other bases. And now that I'm moving to a larger base, it's going to be a different type of story being on reserve there. But all to say is that being on reserve is not as horrific as some people make it seem, because after a while you kind of learn how to work the system and have the system work in your favor in certain aspects. Another term is standby. So being on standby, you might hear like, oh, someone say, do you have a trip today? No, I have airport standby. Or sometimes you may hear airport alert. So that's basically where you are quote unquote working. You're at the airport, usually probably in the crew room, or sometimes there's flight attendants that don't like to sit in the crew room and they might just find a comfortable vacant area at a gate inside of a terminal and sit down and wait to see if they get called. So basically being on standby is you are in position to work a flight if crew scheduling calls you and say, hey, we have a trip that needs to be worked. Either maybe a flight attendant is running late and they're not going to be there in time, or someone gets sick, or there's an emergency and a flight attendant that's already assigned that trip can't work that flight. So you'll be on standby to fill in for them at the airport. Sometimes you may be on standby at home, or with the company that I work for calls it ready reserve, and that's a reserve flight attendant that is on standby but at home. So you typically will be at home or wherever you're at for the day and just be ready to be called if they need you to work a flight, but you just instead at home waiting to see if you get called versus being at the airport. So those are two types of scenarios that you may get. And just because you have standby alert or ready reserve does not always necessarily mean you will get a trip, because a lot of times I will have airport standby and I'll be there for 4 hours and I don't get a trip, but I still get paid. And there'll be times where I'm at home where I'm just waiting to see if I get a trip and nothing happens. Deadhead. Deadheading is basically where you are at work but you're not working. You're a flight attendant that's going to be in a customer seat that's getting transported in a sense to the next city that you will either be working a flight from, or you sometimes may deadhead literally to a city, have a layover, and then work in that city the following day for another flight. So basically you get paid to not work. Limo. So limo is something that you will see like on your pairing. Say you may be getting picked up from the airport to go to your layover, or I even had an instance where I got picked up from the airport to go get transported to another airport, and it said limo on there. Y'all, when I first started, I really thought I was getting picked up by a legit limo. I got all excited. I was in one of my vlogs like, yeah, limo's picking me up. Y'all, when the limo came, it was a Toyota. But basically it's just a fancy term for transportation. Another common term is KCM, and KCM is something that flight attendants love, pilots love. We love KCM, which is an acronym for a known crew member. And basically that is a specific point in the airport where we can get through security to actually have access to the terminal, so we don't have to go through normal security check where the lines are typically longer, and we're also able to bring liquids in our carry-ons without having to leave them behind. But that is on case-by-case basis, because there is something that's called random. So random is, say I'm on my off day, I'm in my regular clothing, I do not have on uniform, and I have my carry-on bag, and there is lotion in there, body wash in there that's over 8 ounces, and I get random, which is basically when we are chosen to get screened for extra security purposes. So sometimes flight attendants or anybody that's working for the airline industry may go through the airport and go through KCM and have things in their luggage that are not supposed to be in there. So from time to time they will do random checks just to make sure that you're not breaking any policies or doing anything that you're not supposed to. So although you can travel with large toiletry items in your bag, if you're not in uniform, they have to throw them out. So that is kind of like a con to traveling through KCM when you have those large items in your bag, because if you do get randomized that day, you'll have to unfortunately discard those items, or you can, check them. But if you do decide to check those items, you have to, go back out to the main area of the airport, check your luggage. And when you're non-revving, a lot of times you don't know if you're going to get on a flight, so you don't want to check your luggage to a destination that you're not even 100% sure that you're going to make it to. So that's a whole hassle in itself. But all to say, KCM is a nice luxury to have when you do not want to stand in long lines to security and you just want to get through with your stuff. You don't have to go, usually depending on what airport you're at, you don't have to go through the metal detector. You just walk through, show your company ID badge, and scan your KCM card, which is basically a number that is given specifically to you, identifying yourself as an employee. You scan your KCM card, they're just making sure that you're in good standing with the airline, that you don't have no like security flags or anything on your account or whatever they're checking for. They do all that when you scan your ID to go through. So that's KCM, super clutch. Next one that you may hear is like sit or sit time, which basically means, say for example, I'm flying from New Jersey to Denver, Colorado, and once I get to Denver, before I do my next leg, which is my next flight for the day, I have a 3-hour sit time in between my next flight. So sit times for a lot of flight attendants gets very annoying because you're just kind of a lot of times ready to end your day, but you can't get there right away because there is a time gap in between your flights and you're just sitting at the airport or sitting in the crew room or trying to get a nap in when you can. So that's basically sit time, downtime in between flights. Another term is crew room. So crew room is a specific area that's located in the airport. This is not all airports because some airports are really tiny and they may not be a hub or a main base for the airline, so they don't have a crew room. But basically a crew room is an area that is for flight attendants only, that can go in there and pretty much lounge around when you have sit time. Crew room will sometimes have regular chairs and sleeper chairs, which are chairs that typically like recline and you can take a nap in there. There's usually like a coffee maker, microwave, and just whatever you may need in between flights. So that's also a nice luxury as well. Another term is bidding that you may hear when it relates to scheduling. So you might hear someone like, oh, did you submit your bids for this month, or did you get the bid that you want? Basically that's just submitting your request for the days that you would either like off, or if you're a line holder you might be submitting your request for the type of schedule that you would want and as far as what trips you would like to be working for the upcoming month. Another term that you may hear is cabin, and that's just referring to the area of the aircraft where passengers or customers are going to be seated on the aircraft. So hey, go walk through the cabin or do your cabin check is basically you just walking through the main part of the aircraft where there are people on the plane. That's the cabin. Another term is flight deck, and that's basically the area where the pilot and first officer sit in the very front of the aircraft. So that's their area, their office. That's called the flight deck. And first officer is the individual that assists the captain on the aircraft with leveling out the duties and just being another person in there to help ensure that you get to where you're going safely. They can pretty much do everything that the captain can do. So say for example the captain can no longer perform their duties, they get incapacitated or whatever, not or whatever, we don't want that to happen, but if something happens to the captain, the first officer is capable of performing the duties that a captain would, but they're just not, I guess, like 100% certified to be a captain. I think that's how it works. Don't quote me because I don't know all the stuff that is related to what they do. I'm a flight attendant, not a pilot or first officer, okay? Don't come for me. The captain is actually the one that is flying the aircraft and is the main point of contact for anything that involves the aircraft or any issues. You would directly go to the captain, and the first officer is basically just another individual that helps make decisions up at the front. So that's the flight deck. Another thing that we can go over as it pertains to areas of the aircraft is first class, which is the front of the aircraft where there are seats located. Those customers typically pay an upcharge or higher ticket fees to sit in those seats, to where those seats typically have larger leg room, they have more comfortable seats. You get full service in that area depending on how long the flight is, so that may include hot meals, all you can drink alcoholic beverages or non-alcoholic beverages as well, and yeah, they get pretty much all that in first class. Economy plus, that term is specific to the airline I work for. I'm not sure if other airlines refer to it. Economy plus they're not referred to as economy plus, it might be referred to business class. And business class is basically seats that have larger leg room, may have like areas to charge your phone. Now with the company I'm with, there's some aircrafts where all the seats have chargers for your phone. So yeah, economy plus just has larger leg room most of the time, and then you'll just have regular economy. Those seats don't have the extra leg room. Sometimes they won't have areas for you to charge your phone or electronic devices, and those are typically towards the end of the aircraft, or the aft of the aircraft, as we already went over earlier. CSR, which is a customer service representative. Another term that may be synonymous with that is the gate agent. So that's going to be probably your main point of contact during the boarding process of your flight, or that may be someone you communicate with if there's issues with a seat dupe. A seat dupe is basically where two passengers have been allocated the same exact seat on the aircraft. That's who would rectify that situation a lot of times, or sometimes the flight attendants do as well. But that's the person that's basically the main point of communication in the gate area during the boarding process. And if there's any kind of like issues that need to be resolved, you would communicate with the CSR agent as it pertains to boarding and seats, and coordinating different things with the boarding process. So with the airline that I work with, they're the individual that closes and opens the aircraft door as well. So that's the CSR. They really help us out a lot, I can say. They definitely make our jobs easier most of the time with getting people on and off the aircraft. So definitely appreciative of CSR agents. Love you guys. Another term you may hear is briefing, or hey, did you do your flight attendant briefing yet? Or did you brief the other crew members? Briefing is basically a fancy word for a meeting. So we will typically have a briefing before it begins boarding to go over any important information to that specific flight. So just going over any security things, or going over any things to keep in mind when we're boarding. Like you may say, hey, we have 4 passengers coming on board today with wheelchairs, or hey, we have a UMNR, unaccompanied minor, and that individual is a child, a parent or guardian will not be traveling with them, and they'll be alone. So we need to facilitate a safe handoff between the company and to their guardian or whoever's picking them up once they land at their final destination. So all that we're talking about before boarding begins, so we're all aware of what we need to know and who's on our aircraft and why they may be on our aircraft, or whatever the case may be. That's all talked about in the briefing. We also go over flight time. We go over if there's any expected turbulence, or if we need to stay seated for a certain amount of time before we can get up to conduct our service. All that stuff is typically talked about in that briefing. Those briefings take place with inter-crew members, and then there's also briefings that are done with passengers. And what would that typically look like? That it would be an exit row briefing. So if you ever see flight attendants before we take off, you'll see them asking people, are they aware that they're sitting in an exit row, and going over if they're qualified, willing, and able to assist in case of an emergency. So that's a briefing that you'll have with the flight attendant and a customer, just to make sure everybody's on board and where they're sitting at and what they need to do if they need to do something. Okay, that's a briefing as well. Another thing I want to tell you guys is that if you're becoming a flight attendant, you're going to come across so many acronyms. It's a lot of acronyms, but as you get through working in the industry and getting into your role, you'll be more comfortable with knowing what things are, or even come up with ways for you to personally remember stuff, because I'm not going to lie to you, it's a lot of things that you have to know. But don't feel overwhelmed, or don't feel bad about yourself if you're watching a video and you don't know what someone is talking about, or don't feel bad if even you got your wings and you're starting out fresh and someone is talking to you on the aircraft and you have no idea what they mean. Like, trust me, that was me when I first started. I was like, what is that? Like, what are you talking about? But ask questions, or if you don't know something, if you don't feel comfortable asking in that moment, or you don't feel comfortable asking that person that may have introduced you to a certain term, write it down on your phone and research it when you get back to your hotel or get back to your house. That way you can be more informed and more confident and comfortable with lingo in the airline industry, because I promise you it is utilized a lot. But it's also kind of cool to just learn new things and gain more information. But I think it's like with any language, like, you know, you have your codes, you have your lingo and your jargon, and it's just something new to learn, and just have fun with it. So I would encourage you to do that. Don't get overwhelmed with all this stuff, because trust me, it'll probably be a day where somebody says something to me and I'm like, oh, what you talking about, Willis? But it's okay. We're human, we don't have to know everything. Hey guys, that's pretty much sums up this video. But if you guys would like me to expand on anything further that I've discussed or brought up in today's video, please let me know. Drop some comments in the comment section, interact with me so I know what to produce for you guys or what you want to know more about. I'm here to be a resource for you. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something new. And as always, thank you so very much for spending time with me and clicking on today's video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, please. All of that helps me out as a creator. And I just really want to put an emphasis on subscribing if you have not already, because it really gives me a boost of encouragement to let me know you are enjoying the content. It's something that you want to see more of, and it just helps me grow and push my content out to other viewers on YouTube who are interested in this type of content. So please do me that favor. It costs you nothing. It's free. It's free, and it takes only a couple seconds to do. So please do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video just as much as I enjoyed creating it for you today, and I can't wait to speak to you guys soon. Sending you lots of love and light. Peace.